This is Alcor's patient care bay. This is where we have all our patients stored, currently 199 humans, plus almost 100 pets. So they're not really dead, they're just legally dead. They're not biologically dead, obviously, because you can donate all kinds of organs that are still viable and keep other people alive. It just means that something critical has failed that we can't fix today. We come at the stage where doctors today have given up, where today's medicine and technology is not sufficient to keep you going, but we're saying instead of just disposing of the patient, give them to us, we're going to stabilize them, stop them getting worse, and hold them for as long as it takes for technology to catch up and allow them to come back to life and continue living. So each patient is wrapped first of all in a sleeping bag to protect them in case we have to move them to soak up liquid nitrogen. Then they're put inside this aluminum pod where they're secured in there, so they have mechanical protection. And then they're secured in these. So these things being made of aluminum are very good temperature conductors. They're very much like people in a long-term coma, except there's no metabolism. So to them, no time is passing. They're not alive because obviously there's no metabolism, not functioning, not moving around. So people say, well, if they're not alive, they must be dead. Well, no, there's kind of an in-between state, which is not really alive or dead. So in our view, dying is a process, and cryonics stops that process. It puts dying on a pause and lets you go into the future where we have greater capabilities to reverse that and bring you back to life. The first stage of the procedure, we have to wait until the patient's been declared legally dead. We then move the patient from the bed into this ice bath, and we're going to cover them in ice and add some water. Obviously we don't have that here, but we're going to use this device called the squid to circulate icy water around the patient. That accelerates the cooling, external cooling. At the same time, we're going to apply a mechanical CPR device. It's much more efficient and less tiring than manual CPR, and a respirator. First of all, we have to circulate blood around the patient, otherwise the heat won't get moved around, and we want to get heat out of the brain especially, so we have to circulate that around. And also we're going to give a series of medications to protect the cells against damage. So we're going to stop the patient from returning to consciousness, number one. We're going to stop the blood from clotting. We're going to keep the blood pressure up. All these things we have to do to maintain viability, much as you do when you're donating organs. The one in the middle is by far our youngest patient, not quite 3 years old, a little girl from Thailand who had brain cancer. Both her parents were doctors, and she had multiple brain surgeries, and nothing worked, unfortunately. So they contacted us. Because they were actually medical professionals, they actually set up an operating room in Thailand, and we could send a team out there and do the procedure we'd normally do locally. When people talk about cryonics, they often say, well, you guys freeze people. And that's not really accurate, because freezing really implies the formation of ice crystals. And that's something we want to avoid, because ice does damage to cells. So we don't want to freeze the patient, we want to vitrify them. Once you cool to very cold below freezing, the solution, instead of crystallizing, will just get thicker and thicker, and it's like a glassy block holding all the cells in place without any internal structure, and so does no damage. And once we reach that point, which happens around minus 110 degrees C or so, once that's happened, the body becomes a true solid, and absolutely nothing is happening in the body. There's no biochemical activity whatsoever, certainly no neurological activity. So at that point, really, it doesn't matter whether you wait a day or 100 years, you're going to be just the same as when you started. So some of the cooling takes place in that box, but then the final cool down will take place in this smaller dewar here. Again, the patient's in the aluminum pod, so we can just hook that up, open up our roof, winch them up, move them along, and then straight down into one of these other containers for long-term storage. For the whole body, it's a minimum of $200,000, which if you look at the cost of open heart surgery is really pretty low. Just for the brain alone is $80,000, and those are minimums. And a big chunk of that money is put aside to keep you cryopreserved for the long term.
The only group that you really see getting excited about the possibility are people who are people who specialize in studying the distant future, or people who have a stake in wanting you to pay the money to do it. I don't really see any mainstream brain scientists, physiologists, people from psychiatry who study the mind. They're not lining up saying, I think this is a sound idea. Moreover, I don't think any of them do it. So at the end of the day, I think this notion of freezing ourselves into the future is pretty science fiction, and it's naive. It's almost like what you'd be thinking about in a college dormitory discussion. If I could just freeze myself and then defrost myself, kind of like a bag of peas, and wind up way in the future, wouldn't that be cool? Sounds okay, but then you realize how much we are products of our own time.
Come on, boy. Come on, you can jump. Okay, wait, jump. Woohoo! Our dog, Oscar, here he is, right here. He was almost 15 years old when he became ill, and He was suspended, put in cryonics. I think that in the future, the people who opted in for human cryopreservation or human cryonics preservation will most likely have family members and or friends who have also signed up for cryonics. And then it's just a waiting period. It's like, you know, you're in flight, you're in transport to your destination, and the destination would be the future, where a person who had a cancer or ALS or some other type of injury or disease is revived, the disease or injury cured or fixed, and the person is has a new body cloned or a whole body prosthetic or their body reanimated, and meet up with their friends again. People wondered, is this a human? And the same type of criticism is often reflected on cryonics. They won't be human when they're revived, or who will they be? Will they remember themselves? And what, you know, it'll be a frightening world. I don't think so.